Hi guys, welcome to Start Our Wealth, where we give practical and actionable advice to starting your wealth and creating and maintaining your business. Today's topic continues our Coronavirus Business Edition series with an overview of the basics to successfully manage your business through COVID-19. This is going to be a two-part video, so make sure you come back on Thursday when we post the conclusion to this series with a 6-step actionable plan to set you up for success during COVID-19, and really to set you up to be able to successfully navigate any unanticipated crisis. So let's start with the basics. To manage your company successfully, you have to manage risk. To manage risk, you have to be able to identify it. I want to introduce you to a relatively new concept, the black swan. What is a black swan? By definition, a black swan is an unpredictable or unforeseen event, typically one with extreme consequences. COVID-19 is and is not a black swan event. To the business owner caught by surprise, COVID-19 feels like a black swan event. However, as the author of The Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, would argue, while COVID-19 was statistically remote, it was and is largely predictable, as he and Bill Gates both published in January warning about the impending pandemic. Classification, however, depends on the observer. It's the Thanksgiving turkey example. The turkey sees his impending death as a black swan event, but the butcher does not. In a bell curve, COVID-19 would be at the end of the curve, but still possible, still predictable, and outsized in its devastation. As Taleb explained in his series Inserto, which I link to in the description, the key to protecting yourself against true black swan events is to diversify your business to be able to survive random stresses, like COVID-19, rather than break under any particular one. In a nutshell, don't put all your eggs in one basket. To that end, the goal should not be single-minded in the pursuit of the most gains for the shareholder. As Taleb says, it might seem like the most efficient way to get home is to drive 200 miles per hour, but odds are you'd never get there. It might seem like you should pursue the most profits all the time as a return to yourself and other shareholders, but by focusing on that instead of the process to get there and the victories you need along the way in order to realize success, you end up ignoring that which will actually achieve the results you want. Since the 1970s, shareholder capitalism became the goal. In order to create sustainable shareholder value, what we actually need to focus on is stakeholder capitalism. Many of you already know, but a shareholder is literally the ownership of the company, usually yourself and your investors. A stakeholder is someone or something with an interest or concern in your business. For example, stakeholders are usually comprised of customers, employees, suppliers, and vendors, as well as the community you operate in. We should be focused on building up our stakeholders since they are the drivers to growth for shareholder net profit in the long run anyways. To give you some examples on how stakeholders affect shareholder profits, just take a look at what's been happening during COVID-19. Without a loyal customer base, salons and spas wouldn't have been able to survive since they were forced to shut down completely. The ones who invested in their customer relationships were able to sell prepaid gift cards in order to continue paying their bills. Without employees willing to risk their health to work and keep the company going, the company would be unable to execute. The companies without strong supplier relationships were put on the back burner to receive their materials, which meant they couldn't manufacture their goods to sell. In layman's terms, for example, when the meat shortage happened, a bunch of barbecue restaurants had to move to selling chicken and were unable to sell their high profit margin beef and pork products, which meant lower profit margins. Without a strong community, economically healthy and physically healthy, companies would have no customers. Economically depressed neighborhoods usually have a population with less discretionary funds, meaning they can't spend it on your company's goods. These neighborhoods usually have more conflict, which can lead to temporary business closures, and a certain amount of retail loss due to crime. The whole point of stakeholder capitalism is to run your business with an eye towards longevity and sustainability. In order to achieve that, you have to be able to adapt and turn yourself into an agile and resilient business. So what is resilience from the business perspective? In the simplest terms, it's what you try to instill in your kids. It's the capacity to fall off that bike and get back on to try again. Resilience is the capacity to absorb failure and continue onwards. There are two outcomes if you're successfully resilient. Number one, you're able to prevent crises, protect the company, and prepare effectively for if or when things go wrong. 2, you're able to respond to issues, recover from problems, and then review how it happened. So how do we get there? We're going to go over the steps you can take to reach these outcomes in part 2 of this video series. But before we get too much into that, I wanted to do a general overview of the basics of resilience. Today's discussion is about more of the practical and actionable aspects to being resilient. However, I do feel that it's important to touch on the philosophical and academic basis on the ideas of resilience so that you have the proper context as well. If you want to hear a deep dive into all aspects of resilience, let me know by leaving a comment and I'll plan for a future video. Okay, on to our quick review. In the report Roads to Resilience by the Cranfield School of Management, which I linked to in the description below, they did in-depth case studies on 23 successful companies and discovered that all of them had a commitment to these 5 principles of resilience. Number 1 is that resilient companies have exceptional risk radar. Number 2, they have resources and assets that are flexible and diversified. Number 3, they value and build strong relationships and networks. Number 4, they have the capability to ensure decisive and rapid response. And number 5, they review and adapt to changes and adverse events. In part 2 of this video series, you'll see how the strategies I outline will all lend itself to establishing and strengthening these 5 principles of resilience. In a nutshell, resilience means that you can afford a few failures. Innovation is usually achieved through trial and error. If your system doesn't have the slack to be able to test and occasionally fail with new projects or concepts or ways of doing things, then you won't be able to advance as quickly as your competitors. Resilience also means that you've diversified your company enough. For example, my company handles everything from basic bookkeeping and financial accounting to in-depth analysis and managerial accounting for wealthy individuals and corporations, as well as film and television clients. A lot of people in my job sector focus solely on one of those 3 markets, and even within those markets, they restrict themselves further by segmenting based on job functions or roles. Like in film and television, being a production accountant and a post-production accountant are 2 separate things. They're 2 separate jobs. I've always done both and project our services as available to do both. So when the film and TV industry came to a screeching halt because of COVID, even then, we still had post-production clients and tax incentive preparation clients to cater to, as well as our other clients in less affected industries. A lot of production accountants who only deal in film and television and who were solely production accountants had limited options when their productions shut down over COVID. The majority of them are waiting for production to ramp back up as their only recourse. Diversification doesn't just mean the kinds of clients you service or the business streams you play in. It can also mean how you get paid and how you build your products. For me, I have retainer clients as well as per project clients. I have per hourly as well as set fee clients. This ensures that when hours are low on one client, I still have security from my retainer clients. With regard to supply chain, when it comes to your inventory, you want to be able to have options. If you only manufacture out of China and the US restricts the import-export of goods, you need to know where else you can go to get your products made. If you're a restaurant owner and a particular ingredient you use to make your signature dish had a bad crop year, where else might you be able to source your item, or what can you replace it with? And finally, resilience means that even if there are outside negative forces that are beyond your control, you still have the means and capability to survive until it passes. Whether that means you have the balance sheet to support a long winter or the logistical capability to overcome these forces, your company can survive that which is out of your control. Let's look at the other half of the equation to becoming or being a sustainably successful business: agility. Agility is the ability to adapt quickly to both internal and external market changes. The outcomes of agility are that you're able to have much faster tactical responses and strategies when you need to, and you're able to adjust and reroute before it's too late. So there's a speed component as well as a capability component to agility. So what does agility mean in the practical sense? Agility means that you can leverage debt. That doesn't mean you have to be in debt, but that you have to have quick access to it, and you're not afraid to use it when needed. However, when needed does not mean to pay bonuses or dividends to company owners. It just means that you have access to lines of credit or the ability to get credit available quickly. Agility means that there is an efficient process to how decisions are made. You've identified who has the right to make the decisions and when and how they are allowed to make those determinations. Ideally, you're using the DACY or RACY systems in your company. If you don't know what that is, I am planning on going over both of those workflow processes in future videos. Comment down below and let me know if you're eager to see it sooner. But basically, they are clearly defined workflow processes which outline who is responsible for executing, approving, consulting, and being informed on a decision. In urgent and intense situations, if you have a clearly outlined process, you can respond faster even when your plans go off the rails. Agility means you have access to the data to make decisions quickly. Imagine if every time you had to make financially based decisions and you couldn't get real-time data like your current revenue or overhead costs. It would be like flying blind. It's being able to access your KPIs or key performance indicators as often as you need to and have that information be readily available and accurate. There are more examples of what agility means to your business, but in our final example, agility means you can pivot your company offerings if you have to. It's the automakers like Tesla who are able to quickly start selling ventilators instead of cars. If you can't pivot when you have to, you end up like Polaroid and Kodak, obsolete when new forces change your business landscape and you can't keep up with it. I think Bill Belichick, the legendary coach of the Patriots, inadvertently put it best when questions emerged around his players' 40-yard dash time, which was slower comparatively than someone else's. Belichick said the time speed is always a tricky thing because time speed isn't football speed. When you run a 40-yard dash, there's nobody in front of you. Nobody's going to hit you. It's just point A to point B. And there's something to be said for that. Football, in a lot of cases, is not like that. So a player's running a ball or running full speed, covering a kick, or running the ball and there's people in front of him and people trying to tackle him. It's a little different speed than running a sprint on the stopwatch. We look at that as more competitive speed. And when you see competitive speed in a game, whether that's scouting in the draft or watching a competitive NFL game, sometimes competitive speed takes over for a little bit for what the time speed is or isn't. We've seen a lot of fast guys not be the first guy down on kickoff coverage. We've seen a lot of guys that aren't that fast be the first guy down on kickoff coverage and so forth. And there are some players, Lawrence Taylor was one, that however fast he needed to run, he ran and caught the guy. It didn't matter what that guy's time speed was. It didn't matter what Lawrence's time speed was. If he was behind him and he had to catch him, he caught him. So guys, that's agility. Agility is like football. You might be able to run in a straight line with no issues for a while, but your competition is always chasing you. Agility is the ability to avoid the hit or adjust after you are hit and find the success regardless. It's the ability to compensate and overcome even when your competition might be seemingly faster and stronger than you. If you can keep these two criteria in mind, agility and resilience, you'll have a better shot at weathering this storm. For those of you contemplating starting your new business and striking out on your own, you're not alone. Experts agree that as the crisis increases, we'll see a corresponding increase in what's known as survival entrepreneurship. With unemployment on the rise, people will start their own side hustles out of necessity. This is what's known as survival entrepreneurship. Interestingly, survival entrepreneurship is the traditional path of immigrants. My parents came here as immigrants and saved to start their own successful restaurants. They had 3 kids and, like most Asians, had to support multiple generations as part of our culture. So that included my grandparents as well as a number of aunts, uncles, and cousins. The urgency immigrants feel compels them to search for the opportunity and survive even in the face of extraordinary adversity, like the inability to speak the language and the unfamiliarity of assimilating into a new culture. Simply put, they have no other choice but to survive. History shows that this kind of entrepreneurship is more durable than startups created by affluent entrepreneurs. There's something to be said about when you have to do it versus when it doesn't matter as much. In essence, yes, times are really hard right now. But if we can look at it as an opportunity to rise to the occasion rather than focus on what we can't change, our energies will be spent on more important tasks and strategies. At the end of the day, if we're able to achieve despite all of these external pressures, that's when it really feels meaningful. So that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 when we post it on Thursday. If you want to be notified as soon as it's posted, make sure you hit the bell icon and subscribe to our channel. And of course, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. It really helps us out and lets us know the kind of content you're enjoying so that we make more of it.